With me today is Susan Simon, and Susan spent more than 4 decades working across Australian school communities. Originally from England, she studied English and Fine Art at the University of Nottingham before completing her teaching qualifications at the University of Queensland. She went on to lead 3 independent Queensland schools as principal before completing her doctorate in 2008 and moving into academia, lecturing and publishing in the fields of teacher education and school leadership. The Secrets of St. Jude's, her debut novel, a work she describes as academic noir, blending her insider experience of school leadership with psychological tension and institutional critique, which sounds very intriguing. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you very much, Julie. It's lovely to be here having a chat with you this afternoon.
Absolutely. So good to be chatting with you, and congratulations on your first novel.
Thank you very much. Yes. Debut fiction. So yes, it
Yeah.
feels amazing that it's actually been published and is out there. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's such a big thing. So
Yeah.
well done.
Thank you.
Now, I'm really interested to dive into your background, which will lead us to your book, because you've got a massive leadership story. And I really think that our listeners are going to be very intrigued by that and also get a lot of value from your stories. So you spent decades leading schools, and by all accounts, you loved it. But before we get into that, what did leadership feel like for you when it was really working?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing when you look back at the different phases in your life. Before I went into education, before I came to Australia, I actually worked in marketing and management for British Airways, actually. So I'd had not that I got to a very high level there. I was only there for 5 years straight after uni. So I didn't have a lot of leadership experience, but I was starting to think about what it would mean to be a leader, I suppose. So then I came to Australia. I met my first husband. We ran an arts and crafts business, something completely different. And again, it wasn't a specific leadership thing, but it was our own business. So we had to sort of work out how we did things, which was good experience. So then it was when I got into teaching, I suppose, was my first real chance of leadership position. So I started as a classroom teacher, as everybody does. I did move forward quite quickly, I think partly to do with the experience I'd had at British Airways. It was very, very good all-round training that I got there in terms of, they called it management. We tend not to necessarily call it management in schools, but there's an element of that, and I think that certainly helped me. So I did progress quite quickly. But going back to your question, interestingly, when I was still at kind of a middle leadership position, and I was it was one of those staff retreat days that we used to have in the days leading up to the start of term. And I remember we were sitting around in groups of 4 or something, and we had to say key words about each of the other people in the group. And my dear friend Brad, he's become a dear friend now, he's a colleague at that school, he pinpointed that I was a good leader. And, I had this feeling of, I don't really know what I'm doing that's making you see that in me. And that was a real turning point for me, because I thought, I'm actually just enjoying what I'm doing. I feel like I've got a purpose. I'm working with students and staff that I love. And I hadn't really thought about, not in an ambitious sense or anything like that. Yes, I'd had the background with British Airways, and I kind of liked, taking on responsibility and that sort of thing. But when he said it, I went, oh, I hadn't really seen myself as that. So I think that showed me that there was a bit of I don't know if it's humility or sort of, it wasn't naivety, because I don't think that's relevant, but it was honestly, as I was stepping into increasingly more responsible leadership jobs, I wasn't really aware of it. So when answering your question, how did it feel? It felt totally normal. It felt like I was doing a good job, and I loved working with people. And when I went on to more responsible jobs, I guess that also determined when I knew it was a good leadership role, because I wasn't so conscious of it. I was working as a team. I always wanted to work as a team.
Mm,
One of my the principal that I had in my early days when I was a classroom teacher, he used to get us around the table and he'd say, "We're all equals around this table. I want everybody contribute, no matter what your role is." And I guess I always had that sort of aim as well. So I think the
mm,
places in the leadership position I had where leadership was going well was when I truly empowered other people and they
mm,
felt that they could contribute. So I'd say teamwork was one of the signals of good leadership. Being in one of the schools I was at was a new school and I was able to choose my own staff. So I have to say that was the most amazing experience, being able to not just select staff, but to work with them as a team. And we
mm,
honestly, we did build up a wonderful team. But that's a unique position, and you don't often get that opportunity to choose your own staff. But for
mm.
me, that was fantastic. So yes, when things were going well, I was so busy. Such a demanding job, but I didn't never minded that when things were going well and I was working with good people and having time to work with students as well. So that's how I
Yeah,
felt as a leader, I guess.
I love that. It's like when you're just in flow
In your
and you're like,
flow.
you're
Yeah,
actually like being, emulating that leader that you want to be
yeah.
and, doing all the things that you're wanting to do. And it's
Mm,
so great to hear that you had such a good role model as a leader, as a teacher. So it showed
mm,
you how you wanted to be as a leader yourself.
yeah,
Um, and I think it's really common that I think particularly for women that we don't really understand what we're doing when we're doing a great job. We just do what we do and
you are
it's
in the
we
flow
take
of
it
your.
for granted.
Mm,
Yeah.
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 And it's when you're given that opportunity and you know there's a purpose and
Mm,
yeah, you feel appreciated. That's part of it as well. You don't
mm,
need congratulations all the time, but you need to know that people value your contribution. That's the other
yeah.
part of it as well. And for you to value others. I mean, the more we can give credit to the people that are working with us in the team, the better that is. Not just for them, but it's better for us as well. Definitely.
Yeah.
Share,
Absolutely.
share the glory.
Yes, for
And
sure.
shoulder all the complaints.
That is the role of the leader, right?
I
That you take
know.
all the
Yeah,
bad stuff.
it does turn out that way. Mm,
Yeah. And, particularly that role as principal, you're managing so many stakeholders.
mm,
And it's getting even more challenging now. As I mentioned, like I have a friend who's a principal, and
mm.
just hearing some of her stories, often about the parents, that can be the hardest people to manage, if you like, and deal with. There's just so much that goes on that I don't think people really understand unless you have been in that position or that you have a friend or know someone who's in that
Yeah.
position.
It is the complexity of the role, the number of stakeholders that you have to answer to,
Yeah.
which are, at the end of the day, impossible to please all the people all the time, of course, as we know. Um, And it's, there's been a recent, well, I mean, the Australian National University have done this Principal Health and Wellbeing report for 15 years. So it goes back to probably just around the time I was finishing off being a
Mm,
principal, but it has captured the issues and the difficulties as well as the good things that principals go through. So that was for 15 years that's been going on. The latest report, which pertains to 2025, came out just before my book was published, actually.
mm,
And the figures still support, some of the things that I saw. And going back to your point about the difficulty with parents, one of the most astounding statistics I pulled out of that was the amount of bullying and scandal mongering that 60% talk about gossip and scandal mongering in their schools. Mostly, or I can't remember the percentage breakdown, but a lot of it was from parents, some from
mm.
staff, some from other stakeholders. But that, as you say, it's not necessarily something that people outside of the profession, I know people used to say to me, oh, how can you possibly be a principal? That's amazing, that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
if you sat them down, I don't think they wouldn't know of the whole range of the
Mm,
pressures that you're under.
mm,
The powers that be that have vested interest in the school doing well, and they're not going to let you change things, and you know that you
mm.
really should be changing something.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's yeah, it hasn't got better, and so in a way, the timing of my book was quite interesting because yeah, it does. My story, and we'll talk about my story a bit later, but
Mm,
it is based on experiences I had a while ago, but the
mm.
current data is very much reflecting it as well.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. We could
Yeah,
dive down a whole another rabbit hole there when we're
yeah,
talking about parents and bullying,
yeah.
something I'm passionate about, or adults and bullying, but we won't
Yes.
go there because I'm really keen to know that at what point did you recognize that being a principal, something had shifted for you?
Mm,
And the role where you'd built your identity and built your career stopped
mm,
feeling like you.
yeah.
So when did you first notice that? And what, was there a pinnacle moment or was it just gradual over time?
Well, that use of word of identity is
Mm.
telling there because, in many ways, I don't think I've really lost it.
Yeah.
I haven't wanted to lose it. Yes, I have not worked in that context and that capacity. But I
Mm.
think, I was talking to a good teacher friend of mine last week, and she was talking about the identity of a teacher. And I think so my identity is very much wrapped in being a teacher as well, but I've got that
Mm.
other layer of being principal. So it's I think, yeah, it's a vocation in some similar ways to other vocations. But when you're a principal, you're also expected to be totally wedded to that school. So, um, so and I know we might talk about, how that feels when you're not there anymore.
Mm.
But for me, the turning point, it was partly things coming to a head, which sort of, I'm not going to talk the details of those, but
Yeah.
bringing things to a head which weren't, in my view, dealt with correctly. So I wanted to move away from it. Um, but leading up to that, there were also telltale signs, probably, and just of more interest to your audience, perhaps, is that I think when you're in a role, and even though I'd worked in 3 different schools as principal, total of 12 years, um, and so you can imagine the variety
Mm.
across 3 schools was quite large, there's still a lot of similarities in the role. And towards the end of my last appointment, I must admit I was starting, and whether it's because I was starting to feel stress, and so I was less able to sort of just keep going, and yes, I'm going to write another newsletter copy, and yes, I'm going to write the speech night report. I was starting to feel quite a sense of tiredness from that, and so I recognise in myself that I have a high need for change and variety. So that's something maybe quite unique to me. That wouldn't be for everybody. But to answer your question, when I felt that change, it was a little bit of that, like, do I want to do this for the rest of my life,
Mm.
my career? So that was part of it, even though I didn't think in tangible terms, was I not going to be a principal anymore? But there was a little bit of that. So I can't say it was all to do with the things that came to a head. It was also perhaps me feeling a little bit, I wouldn't say burnt out. I'm a really positive person, very healthy, very keen to
Mm.
get on and get the job done. But I think there was maybe a bit of exhaustion in the background there, which was making me feel like, do I need a change? So they're the telltale signs, I think, for people in situations where they feel that maybe they're not in the right place, or that what they used to love is not carrying on being the favorite thing
Yeah.
that they could be doing. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. I 100% resonate with that because when I was in corporate, I was there for 21 years in
Yes.
the same organization, not the same role. But I remember I got to a point where I just wasn't feeling happy anymore. I was
Mm,
just like, what is going on here? Because I always loved my work, and I grew
Mm.
up there pretty much.
Yes.
And I realized that our values were just totally out of alignment.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my God, what do I do with that? Like, this is
Mm.
all I know is
Mm.
the four pillars of this corporate
Yeah.
organization. So there's a lot of soul
Yeah.
searching there. But I probably ignored those feelings and put it down to something else. But it was when it was just continuing, I was like, something's not right here.
Yes. I think
And
you know it, don't you? And it
yes,
makes you feel flat, really. It makes you feel flat and not necessarily depressed, but it's kind you have the joie de vivre that you normally have to get a very, responsible job done. It seems harder. So, yeah, it's to do with the values of the organization that you're in or how the people around you are behaving. And maybe for me, it was also maybe something about the work I was doing. Even though
yes.
I love the people in the school, so it
Mm,
wasn't I was fed up with them. It was more
mm,
that, okay, got to do the annual report again. Okay, right, here we go. Let's do a really good one this year, everybody.
yeah. So it was that repetitive nature. So of what you're doing.
Yeah, because in
Um,
the school, it's on a yearly cycle.
yes.
Oh yeah, that's that again.
Yeah,
The people who stay
absolutely.
in the same school for 30 years. And, I've
Yeah.
got very good friends who are still at the school that I started at 30 years ago and do a wonderful job. So I'm not denigrating them at all. It's just, it wouldn't have been for me to stay in the same place all the time. I need variety and challenges. So
Yep. And we're all different. So,
we
and
are
we
all
need to
different.
know that about
Yeah,
ourselves. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that moment when you made that decision, it's like, okay, I'm leaving. How did that feel?
Well, it was a bit of a relief, really. I mean, there'd been a
Yeah.
build up to it, and there were, yeah, quite a lot of unpleasant things happening. So, on a personal level, I was quite relieved. I had a lot of very good support people around me. So, I felt that I could do it. And, going back to the identity thing, I probably didn't recognize at the time that I still had this need to still feel like I was at least a teacher, if not a principal, but still be a teacher. So I think I just needed a rest. So coincidentally, my dear mum in England was developing early stages of Alzheimer's, and
Oh, sorry.
so I was able to travel back to see her, which quite a bit, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I'd still been in a very busy job. So that
Mm.
was good. And I also decided to do my yoga teacher training. Yoga was something that I had done for many years. And I thought, well, I'll do this and maybe until I work out what I'm going to do next. If I run the odd class a week, or just for my friends or whatever, that would be lovely. So I did that. And then quite coincidentally, somebody at our local university heard that I was doing something different, and he invited me over to the university to design a leadership course there, and that was the turning point. And they offered me a full-time job, and I ended up being there for 10 years.
Okay.
So that was my turning point. So in a way, how did it feel? Personally, it was a relief, and then these other things appeared, which kind of took me in different directions and enabled me to move forward.
Okay. So you didn't have a clear picture of what you were going to do when you made that decision? Or did you have like, okay, I might
No,
be a yoga teacher?
no, I didn't think of that at the
Yeah.
time at all.
Mm.
I think I was viewing it as having a breather, and I knew my mum. She would only go and see the doctor if I was there from the
Oh,
other side of the
yeah.
world. My brother was absolutely wonderful with her, but that wasn't what she wanted. She wanted her daughter with her. So, so
Mm.
it was good that I was able to do that.
Great.
Um, so in a way, I was focusing on other things. Um, yeah,
Mm.
academia is something I never wanted to go into. I could have done that when I left uni, but I went, oh no, that would be boring. And I ended up being there for 10 years.
Oh, well, the
Um,
journey took you elsewhere.
we
Um,
elsewhere. Yeah.
so when I left my corporate career that I'd been in for so long, I really felt an element of grief with
Well,
that. when
So
I
then,
knew I wanted
yeah,
to lead. So, yeah, and it is tied up with that identity piece because I was very attached to being a senior leader in a corporate
yes,
organization. Then I
yeah,
jumped out to start my own business where I'm a no one.
hmm,
And I really struggled with that
yeah,
transition, but that sense of identity, I really grieved. Was that the
yes,
same for
yes.
you?
So
Mm.
I think, to answer your previous question, I think that was initially how I dealt with it. I think I I was in quite a lot of shock that this had happened to me, but I
Mm.
had these other things to focus on. It was when I started working at Uni SC here, which I live on the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, um, and I'd done my doctorate while I was a principal, so I was able to move into a senior lecturer position there, and I eventually became deputy head of school, not head of school, deputy head of school. So my major focus area was school leadership, and it actually got me thinking a lot more about it, sort of in objective terms and researching the experiences that a lot of people had. But it also brought up to me personally that I was actually still grieving the loss of my job. I never liked working in academia as much as I did in school. So there was always that, this is great, I've got this good job. Anybody looking at it will think it's the bee's knees. I've walked into this, I'm doing well again, but it's, for me, it was a bereavement. And one of the areas that I did research was attachment theory, which you'd be
Mm.
interested in because you've been talking about that as well. And I did some research with an academic from the United Kingdom, and he had had some experience of senior leaders, for whatever reason. And of course, we know that some people have to leave their jobs because they're not doing a good job. So,
Yeah.
let's face it, it's not all beyond the powers of reason that, people move on from jobs. But,
Mm.
I think there is a very, very high incidence of people in particularly private schools, both here and in the UK, where people are moved on very, very frequently,
Mm.
um, probably not for good reasons. So we started to do some research on it, and we really focused on that attachment theory and how difficult it was for the people that we spoke to get over what they had experienced. So, yeah, definitely, it is a grieving process because
There is.
the school, the powers that be, when they appoint a principal, expect you to be committed to your school. It's your school, your sporting teams, your play that you put on, and everything really. And it's everybody's, but I used to talk about it. My school's doing this. What's your school doing? It's a sense of
Mm.
ownership, and you
Yeah.
probably felt very proud of the company you worked for
Mm.
as well. And so when you have that degree of ownership and feeling of belonging, you are attached. And when you leave suddenly or in a way that you hadn't planned, it's without the normal rituals of leaving a place. Very often, for a lot of these people we interviewed, they had no, the rites of passage where, everybody gives you cards and flowers and says nice things. And
Yes.
in a school, that's very big when anybody leaves. And if you've suddenly gone, or which a lot of the people we interviewed had, they didn't have that. So that exacerbated it as well. Mm.
Interesting. Because
Yeah.
often when you leave, well, um, that's when you find out what people really think about
Yeah, it
you.
can be
Generally,
very
really
uplifting, can't it?
very
Very
uplifting.
uplifting.
It's like,
Yeah,
why am I leaving?
I know.
Um,
Yeah,
I,
exactly.
yeah, exactly. I speak to a lot of leaders who are staying in an organization or a role that doesn't serve them anymore. Like they've
Mm.
outgrown it, they've outgrown the organization, but there's a lot of fear moving on for various reasons. A lot of it, the uncertainty in the marketplace,
Yeah, of course.
which of course can contribute. But what is the message that you would like to get across to leaders who might be in the same situation as what you were in a
Mm.
different way?
Yeah, and I mean, I know the component you've mentioned there about it's not easy to get another job. Let's face it. So, me sitting here saying, "Well, look for another job if it's not a
Yeah.
good cultural fit," is silly. For me, I look back on the various places I've worked, and I know that some decisions I've made to go into either a particular job or a particular environment, I kind of knew a bit initially that maybe it wasn't right. So, I mean, that's not helping somebody who's now in it, but I do think, if you make a move and you've got some options to apply for, certainly think about, is it a good fit for you?
Mm,
Um, Values wise, how they treat staff, what the legacy is, what do other people say about the organization. Those are really important things. And I probably didn't take enough heed of that in some of my applications. So that's really important. Anyway, for people who are there and trying to cope with it and maybe not got something on to go on to, I think, oh, well, you've got to look after yourself. You can't let the pressures of what you're dealing with pull you down.
mm,
As I mentioned, yoga. I've always done yoga, and I did that a lot during the times when I felt pressurized. It made me feel grounded, and so
mm,
yoga's not for everybody. I know people who really don't like it at all. But if you can find something that is your equivalent to that, and I love the meditative aspect of it, but other people love walking or whatever it might be. So find out what it is, because I think when you feel like you're being drawn down into this way of thinking where you don't know quite how to climb out, I think you've got to find touchstones where it reminds you of who you are, what your
mm,
principles are, and what your blueprint for keeping a health, or keeping healthy, but having a good purposeful life. And so I used to go through things like, okay, I'd draw these little charts and think that, if I was teaching leadership, this is what I would show people. And I probably did bring some of it into my teaching at uni. But so look at all the components of your life. Work is one, and for me, it's always been a very important one. So I can't say, oh, well, just forget it. It's just a job, just pick up something nice and easy. If you're working at a senior level in a leadership position, it is important to you. So value that, but also take time to value all the other things in your life, whatever they
mm,
might be. They'll be different for everybody. But
mm,
try and find a means of staying grounded to what you believe, and to, yeah, reaching out to other people too. I think sometimes we can, when we're in that situation, we start to look only inwards, and
mm,
sometimes surround ourselves with people who are kind of all thinking the same. And so maybe the other thing is to try and keep outward looking as much as you can, because I know it is debilitating when you're in that position and you go, I just don't know how I'm going to climb out of it. I
mm.
understand that very much, but they'd be my main things. There's probably lots of other things, but they'd be the
Mm.
big ones, I think.
No, that's great advice. Great advice. And it's things that people can control as well. So it's within their
Yeah,
power.
be kind to yourself, because
Mm.
if you feel like the organisation's not being kind to you, at least be kind to yourself.
Yeah, totally.
Mm.
Totally. And on a final note, tell us about your book. What is
Oh,
it
I
all
love this.
about?
I've got a book.
I know. Tell
Look,
us about your book.
oh, I look like I'm
Yeah.
color coded here. There we go. Look at
Yes, you do. Absolutely. Now,
that.
what are we going to get when we read
Yeah.
this? It sounds very intriguing.
Okay, so how I started writing it was actually when I was still in academia, and I got together with some other colleagues, one of whom is a well-published author, and she was our muse. And we all wanted to sort of, get back into creative writing. So we'd meet every so often. And I started to write little reflections of things, snippets of school experiences, and the group liked it. And they said, oh, you should turn it into a novel. So it has been going on for quite a long time. This was kind of, I don't know, 7 years ago, something like that. But I didn't really put it together into a novel till after I had finished my role at uni. So I have been retired, although I was an adjunct at uni for a couple of years as well. Anyway, so we've been traveling around Australia and have a bit more time to do some writing. Anyway, so I put it together into what is called this academic noir. So it is, it says on the back cover that it's a whodunit. So it's got lots of twists in the plot. I had great fun writing it. I've conjured up some real dark Machiavellian characters. So it's about a school. It's about a girls' boarding school, which I was principal of two of those. So yeah, there's bits and pieces that might relate to some of the things, but it's not
Mm.
based on any one school. People keep asking me, no, it's not.
No.
It's based on my experiences and also experiences of colleagues I've had in other similar schools, plus things like this report that I mentioned and my research, which shows, what principals go through. So it's a bit of a, what's fueled it. There's all those things, but I've turned it into this story about the principal, which is Rosie Gladshaw, who's a new principal at a very old established girls' boarding school. And it's really the story of how she deals with all those stakeholders, the very thing that we were talking about at the beginning. How does she juggle all the competing factions, the old girls who don't want her to change anything, the sisters who want everything to remain as the same, scandal that starts to spread around the community. How does she deal with that? And it's peppered with these horribly dark characters who do nasty things. So it is a whodunit, but that's the basis of it. I have to say, I've had people reading it who I wouldn't have thought would be particularly interested in a school-based story, but I think the thing that they've taken from it is that these complexities in complex organizations can be related to many different professions and fields. So, you've got competing interests, power struggles, people very ambitious, want to go up the ladder, all that sort of stuff. So, I think you can, even if you're not that attracted to reading a story about a school, I think, you can relate to those machinations that happen in complex organizations and institutional control of organizations too. That's a big feature of it.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds very relatable. I will definitely be getting a copy, and I'll be
Oh, thank
sharing in
you.
the show notes where people can get a copy from. And you said it's in libraries as well, which is very exciting.
Well, apparently it is. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes. So
and
yeah,
you've been getting great reviews.
well, from the people I know who've read it, they've given lovely reviews, and I'm looking to, if your audience do read it, if you can put a review on Goodreads and anything else that you give
Yeah,
your reviews to, that would be lovely. Really
very
appreciate it,
important.
because this
Very
is all very
important.
exciting. It's stepping out into something very new for me.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much for sharing your story as part of our podcast on Leading You.
Thank you very much, Julie. It's been a delight to speak to you this afternoon.
Thank you.